Hi, everyone. This is Pam Padley with Focus IT, and today I have the privilege of hosting the first of our three-part series call on PointCentral Admin Training. I really appreciate everyone taking time out of your busy day and joining me. I look forward to sharing what I know about the system with you and helping answer any questions I can. We're going to be starting the call here in about 5 minutes. We want to give everyone a chance to get logged in. So I appreciate your patience. We'll be starting here shortly. Thank you. Okay, everyone, we're going to go ahead and get started. Again, my name is Pam Padley. I work for Focus IT, and I have the privilege of being your host today on our three-part series training calls we're going to do in the month of February for our PointCentral admins. I really appreciate everyone and all the great comments and emails that I've gotten over the last few months with the different calls that we've been doing. And I'd like to ask everyone to, if you have an opportunity, when I send the link out to the recording of this one, to take a little of your time and view some of the other videos that we've done out there for the different training calls and some of the other training videos that we've done. I'm hoping you'll find them to be quite helpful. So let's go ahead and let's get started. Today shouldn't be as long of a call as it normally is. But basically, we have the privilege of being one of the top hosting companies for Calyx for their PointCentral software for our customers. We take great pride in that, and we like to offer our customers the best customer service that we can. So during our deploying their server and installing their application, we like to take a little time and help them navigate their way through the PointCentral admin page. So basically what I'm going to share with you today is what I normally share with my customers during a deployment, give you a few helpful hints that have been passed on to me along the way, and hopefully you'll find it beneficial yourself. So from the PointCentral admin page, the three areas we're going to talk about today is users, user groups, and data folders. Now, I like to start with user groups when I talk about these three, so I don't necessarily go in order. And the reason why is if I could get Calyx to listen to me and have them change the title or the label of something, I'd ask them to change user groups to security groups, because that's what I want you to think of them as. So basically, most of our customers, when we deploy them, we make sure that they have the three basic security groups. We make sure that they have a manager group. We make sure they have an originator group, and we make sure that they have a processor group or an internal group. Basically, what we do and what we believe is by having a manager group, what it does is it allows you to assign, anyone you assign to that group gets carte blanche access to Point when they log in. They get to see all, do all, they get to go to all screens. They never get that nasty pop-up window saying that they're not allowed. Then we step down, and the next group that you usually want to work with is your processors or your internal staff. The processors or the internal staff usually get the same rights as a manager does when it comes to seeing the loan files. They get access to all loans, but they don't have the same rights as a manager does. Like they don't have rights to change things under utilities, or they don't have rights to change settings or defaults or things like that. Then the next group that we recommend is an originator group or a loan officer group. This group here can apply to loan officers as well as it can apply to processors. And basically, this group here is for users who only need to have access to their own loans. You don't want them to have access to anyone else's. So when they log into the system, they only see their own loans and they don't see each other's. So we usually find by creating these basic three groups, it usually works quite well. But as you can see, this is our demo site, and we do a lot of different testing on our demo site. So you'll notice that we have been asked in the past, could we create an originator group for read-only? You could. Not positive why you would necessarily use that, because when you do a group, the group either has rights to see all loans or only their assigned loans. Those are usually your two limitations on your security screen. So I don't know why you'd want a loan officer to be able to see their loans and not be able to edit their loans. I do agree that there are times that it would be nice to have just a read-only group. And the read-only group would be a great group to create if you had like internal auditors or an outside auditor who you wanted to grant access to your point system for them to be able to go in and view the records, but you don't want them to be able to change anything. Also, by having this group, you can limit what they can actually access when they do log into the system. So I think that a read-only group added to the other three basic groups is really a very good way to go. This processor group would be just the same thing as this group here, which would be processors or internals. I don't see necessarily a need for that. I think these other ones out here were ones that were created a while back that really aren't being used by our system. And I think just no one's actually gone in to clean any of those up. So when I build it, basically, this would be the recommended view that I would recommend to my customers that I was deploying on PointCentral. You can call the groups anything you want, but it just boils down to a manager group, an originator group or a group for users who only see their own loans, and then another group who has rights to see all loans, but don't necessarily have the same rights as a manager. So you want to name your groups what means something to you. And in this particular case, I think for the originator group, I don't think it would call it originators. I think I would call it assigned loans only. Okay, so that's pretty straightforward. And that way, if you're very specific on how you name your security groups, someone behind you coming in, when they look at it, it will make a lot of sense to them. So this would be assigned loans only, this would be managers, this would be processors, and this would be read-only group. So those four groups, unless you have something very unique at your company, should really serve you quite well when it comes to the security groups. I don't know about the rest of you, but I much prefer to have security groups that are well outlined and then apply these security groups to my data folders. I stay away from doing individual user security because that means every time I go in to add a new user, I have to go to each data folder and I have to assign their security. That's way too much work. I'd rather be able to go in, create my user, assign my user to my user group, and know that my security is already in place and I don't have to give it a second thought. So again, you can come in and you can add a group and you can call it anything you want. It's simply a container that we're going to use a little later in the call. And you can come in and you can view those groups. And as you could see, it's very easy to delete them as well as it is to edit them. You want to have your groups in place. You want to have that thought outlined for your company and have your company's best practices in place before you actually go in and you either clean up or you add your users. Now, you have the ability to add a user. My favorite is to be able to list users, but don't overlook this little third option out there that gets overlooked quite often, and we do get a lot of support calls from our customers wanting to know how do they unlock a user account, okay? Because it's kind of hidden there. I really think this probably should have been more out here on the main menu to be a little bit more visible, but under users, we have this third option that says locked out users. So we know that every time you open a Point file, when that file's open, what does Point do? Point puts a reservation on that file. That means that that file is an exclusive use for the user who just opened it, and other people can open it and read only, but no one else can open it to edit it until that user is done and they save and close that file. Well, there are times, and I'm sorry, if anyone told you this, they lied. Technology is not perfect, everyone. It's far from perfect. So what will happen is when you go to close a Point file, the reservation on that file doesn't always get released. It happens, not often, but it does happen. And when that happens, being able to come in to reservations and to be able to see that there's a reservation on that file and that that reservation belongs to that user, that gives you the ability to go in and clear that reservation. That is when you want to get access back to the Point file. That has nothing to do with locked out users. Locked out users is simply users who are locked out of the system because they attempted to enter their password 3 times incorrectly, and it's locked them out of the system. So the locked out users will be users who can't log into the system at all. Ones that can't open a point file, that's going to be a locked reservation. So let's talk about users. Let's go ahead and take a look, and you can see that I have quite a few users out there. From this screen, it makes it really nice that I can come in and I can see the user IDs, I can see their full names, and I have a little options over here to work with those users. Let's go ahead and let's pick a user here that we'll go ahead and we'll pick Caesar here, and we'll come over and we'll edit Caesar. Whether I edit a user account, as you can see here, or whether I come in and I add a new user account, the screens are really identical. You get part of the screen here during the add, but then as you go forward, it'll open up the rest of the screen. So for the purpose of this call, I'm going to create a user called Demo Test. And I'm just going to do demo test at test.com. Now, why did I do this as an email address? Well, I tell all of my customers there's really no right way or wrong way to set up a user and to choose a user ID. It's really up to you and your company and the format you want to do, but you do want to pick something that's always going to be unique. My old recommendation used to be using the user's first initial last name. That usually kept it pretty unique. That thinned it down to giving you success at about a 98%, but it never gave you 100. What does give you 100% within your company is using their email address. So it's really up to you. Either one will work depending on what you're willing to gamble, I guess. Down here under passwords, when you're setting up a new user, you can assign them a password, and then you can let them know what that password is. I personally prefer not to assign them a password, a unique password. What I do is I actually, for the password, I use the password 01. So I use this here, and I assign this as the password to every new user that I ever add to the system. Okay, this meets all of the requirements for the password setup, and I assign it here, confirm it. Because what I do is I tell the users, you should have received your install email to install Point. Now that you have Point installed, you want to log in. When you go to log in, it's going to be your email address or your first initial last name, and your password is going to be password with a capital P 01. The first thing you're going to do is when you log into Point, you're going to go up here and click on File, and you're going to come down here to change password. You're going to be required to enter your temporary password, and then you're going to come down and be required to select your new password. So you can come in and you can simply use the same one, pass that out instead of trying to come up with those unique ones, and simply instruct them to go in and change their password when they first log in. Usually works quite well for me, and it keeps me from racking my brain coming up with unique passwords. The only downside to that, everyone, is that if someone's out and you need to log into their account, you can't unless you have a record of their passwords. So on the other hand, I do have customers. What they'll do is they'll come up with a password schema, and then they will use that, which usually is a combination of the user's name, email address, their position with the company, different things like that. So you can come up with some different schemas, use those, but if you have some really smart users out there, they're going to figure out what that is. So be very careful on the passwords, but it does tell you right here what those password requirements are. Okay, once you've set up the new one, which I guess I probably should have done that because it's not going to let me proceed on if I don't, is you're going to want to remember to come down here and allow access to Point. Now, Point does have a mobile app. I'm not going to be able to answer any questions on the mobile apps, everyone, during the call today. I've never, ever used it. But you will not be able to check the mobile app unless you've actually been licensed to use the mobile app. So in your particular case, if you weren't licensed to use it, more than likely this would be grayed out. And then, of course, down here, it's going to ask them for their email address. A lot of people ask me, what do you do with this email address? What does it do with it? Well, at this point here, There's a place within the system, if someone's in it and you're trying to run maintenance on it, you can email them, and I believe it's pulling their email address from here, but this email address is not feeding from here into the Point system, and not to the best of my knowledge, but if anyone on the call knows something more than I do, please don't hesitate to share. So we're going to come down, we're going to click on Add User, and of course it's going to come back and tell me invalid email address. It's not going to like my email address. That's okay, not a problem at all. What I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm just going to jump over here temporarily, and I don't know if I have one set up for me. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put one in for me under demo, and I'm going to go ahead and jump in with a generic password. And we'll go ahead and we'll copy my email address down, which gives everyone a chance on the call to see exactly what my email address is, and you are always welcome to email me. And we'll go ahead and we'll do Add User. So once someone goes into that screen and they add the user, what normally happens, everyone, is they get to this screen and they think they're done. And this is most of the calls that we get for someone who normally doesn't have to go in and add users very often. They'll get as far as this and then they get stumped. And it's really very simple. Basically, the first box here, if you make any changes, you want to be sure to come down and click on Update. And I've never been one to promote the security question and the security answer. I haven't really figured that part out yet. I think they had intentions for it, but I'm not sure quite how they built that into the code. Down here, you can come in if someone can't remember their password, and you can assign a new password, or you can assign them a default password that they can then access the system and go in and change on their own. But most importantly, what everyone forgets to do is to come all the way down here to the bottom and add the user to the other user groups. Now, you don't need to do this if you're going to go with individual user access. Like I said again, I much prefer to do group access. So all I have to do is add my user to their specific group and know that the security is automatically in place, then require for me to go to every single data folder granting access. So I would come down and I would add them to their group. So I would add myself to the manager group and click on simply Add User to Group. The screen does a little quick blink, and then that group is gone. And what people will think is that it didn't work. So basically what you need to do again is come back over to Users and go to List Users and simply go down and find the user that you set up and simply edit it. And when you do, it will open the screen back up that we were just on. It'll show you all the same information, but it will also show you that it has definitely added your particular user to that group. Now, if you're working in the system, and I'm going to kind of jump ahead and share this with you during the call, and I'll be going back to the screen a couple times during today's call and reiterate it at the end on our last call, is let's say that you have your users and you can see them all here, and you've decided that you want to go from individual access to group access, or you want to know what user is within what group. Okay, all right, you can go to group and you can go to list groups, and it's just going to show you the groups. And if you were to come in and you were to edit the group, it would definitely show you the users assigned to that group. Those were a few mouse clicks that I had to go through to get where I was going, and that's kind of nice, but now I only see the manager group, so now it means I have to go back over here and repeat the same process for the other groups and hope I have a really good memory and I can remember what I'm looking at, or otherwise I'm grabbing screenshots and things like that. Way too much work, way, way too much work. If you want to know what users you have set up in the system and you want to know what groups they're assigned to, please take advantage of the report screen. If you've never ventured down here this far on the menu to the report screen, you're going to love it. One of the things I love about the report screen is this option here where it says user by group membership. If you come in here and click on this, what it will do is it will list all of your enabled users, and it will show you, I believe it's enabled, it may be disabled too, but it's going to show you a list of all of your users, and it's going to show you what groups each of those users have been added to. So as you can see here, it's showing each one of the users, and it's showing each one of the groups. And what's nice about this is you can always grab a screenshot of it. You can always highlight the information, copy and paste it into an email. You can have that available so when you are requested to show people's access in the system for an auditor, this is a perfect screen to go to. This gives you all of it in a nutshell and shows which groups they're added to, and then you can simply show them what access each group has. And you're going, well, where do I find that? Well, I'll get to that in just a couple minutes. Okay, so again, on users, it's really very easy. You can add your users, you can list your users, and again, you have the ability to come over here under effective access rights. So we'll go down to the one that I just created here and we'll click on view. When you do, it's going to jump you into this screen here, and it's going to jump you into some really long list. In my particular case being my demo site, it's going to jump you into a list of all of the different data folders. Okay, this group has access rights to this template group, and this group has access rights to these data folders. So that's another nice little benefit to be able to do a quick look, but it's not going to tell me what rights that user group has within each one of these data folders. It's just kind of showing me the data folders that they have rights to. So it's not too bad, but it's still a nice little option, and most people don't even realize that it's there, and you can click on it. And of course, we've already talked about edit, and you have the right to delete. There is a misunderstanding. People think that they have to edit a user, and they have to come here and uncheck the box to remove their access rights to Point. That's not true. Right here from the main menu, you can come in and you can grant access, and you can remove access. Okay, now I'm talking to the admins of PointCentral, so I'm going to share a little thing that I used to do with my users, be it right or be it wrong. What I found, excuse me, that made this screen quite beneficial is, as the IT administrator, when I was trying to contact one of my users and they were ignoring me and they weren't replying back, no problem at all. I would email them once, I would do a second follow-up, but I never did a third. What I'd simply do is come into this screen and I would uncheck their box and simply remove their access from the system. So it would kick them out of the system and it would tell them to contact the PointCentral admin, which just happened to be me. They would call me and they go, Pam, I got kicked out of Point. I can't get in. I go, oh, really? I'm so sorry. I'll take a look at that for you. But by the way, I've been trying to reach you. I need to know, or you need to, or whatever it might be. I get addressed what I need to. I simply come back in, recheck the box, give them access back, and they're up and running. I know it's being a little sneaky, but it's taking the tools that you have available and utilizing them. This is also a great way to be able to secure your system, everyone. Unfortunately, in today's world, there are times where either users resign or you have to let them go. If a user resigns and gives you a 2-week notice and you can judge them based on their performance, usually you don't have to worry about a security risk. But if you have the displeasure of having to let someone go, that is a potential for a security risk, because if you let them go and they still have access to the system, they have the potential to go in and either get access to data you don't want them to have, or possibly to go in and do something wrong. So when you're in a situation where you have to let an individual user go from your company, once you've called them into the office, you want to make sure that your PointCentral admin person logs into PointCentral, goes to their account, and simply unchecks the box. Simply remove their access, no problem at all, simply come down and uncheck it, okay? It immediately takes their access away. Now, this does not affect their loans. It does not affect the loans that are they're assigned to. It does not delete their account. It doesn't mean as quick as you take their rights away that you cannot give them back again. Of course you can. But by unchecking this and removing it from here, it's going to prevent them from logging in. This is also a very nice feature for the companies that have allowed the users to be able to install their Calyx Point in multiple locations. And I know I didn't put this on my outline, but I thought about it this morning, and I did want to touch base with you on this too. Everyone's familiar with your mycalyx.com account. Now, when we help our customers with their deployments with PointCentral, of course, we go in and we help them set up their installation group. And as you can see, I have quite a few out here because we do a lot with this. But as we go in and we have them set up, we set up a group that we call PointCentral or PointCentral Focus. And of course, we make sure that when they install it, it installs the administrator. A lot of people choose not to install the administrator. That's a problem when you're troubleshooting. It's going to give you a lot of headaches. They can't really do much damage. Go ahead and let them install it. give them access to the PointCentral system, and of course, we provide our customers with their URL and with their security key. When you go to add a user to your mycalyx.com account, you want to make sure that you assign them to the installation group for PointCentral. When they're assigned to that installation group for PointCentral, what makes it nice is you'll notice here during the install that I'm not giving them access to any local data folders. Okay, I'm not pointing them to anything. So when they install Point and they connect, it should bring them directly to the PointCentral server. Okay, you'll notice here that there are some black entries and there's some red. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to sort this, and I'm going to scroll down and see that you can see here Bob Anderson has 2 installs of their Point application. This install here is the one on the main computer at the office. The secondary one would be for his laptop. So if you have loan officers that have office space within your building, as well as they have a laptop they take into the field, more than likely loan officers or processors that work at home in the evening or work from home, you're going to notice that they're going to have multiple installs. Calyx does allow you to install on your workstation, on your home computer, and on your laptop. The primary install is the one that appears in black. The secondary ones are the ones that appear in red. All you would simply do is if Bob Anderson wanted or needed to install Point on another device, I simply would select his entry from here, resend him the install email, have him open it on the other device and install. Once he did, then it would come back, it would display here, and it would show the letters in red, and it would show me what computers it's installed on. Okay, so because Bob Anderson has Point installed on several computers, maybe one in the office, maybe one laptop still in his car or at home, if I don't come in here, when I have the misfortune to let that employee go, if I do not come in here and uncheck the box denying their access to PointCentral Admin, they may not have access to their computer in the office, but it doesn't mean they don't have outside access. So the way to lock down your system and guarantee security of your data is simply to come in and uncheck their access. It's really simple, very straightforward. Okay, everyone? So with that said, let's talk about data folders, okay? Data folders are really cool. Excuse me, just a moment. I've been talking a little bit too much today. Data folders to me are really a cool way to separate out or to categorize your loans. Oh, excuse me. Usually when we set up a new PointCentral server, we usually set it up with having 4 main data folders. I tell everyone, think of data folders as drawers in a filing cabinet. You get to decide how many drawers you want in your filing cabinet. Now, this really dates me, everyone, because it takes me back to when I was a processor, and yes, there were still filing cabinets. And you would put your folders in different filing cabinets depending on at what stage that particular loan was at. Well, you look at your data folders the same way, okay? So basically, I tell my customers, start out with your 4 basic data folders. You want a data folder that you have out there is for your leads. All of your leads get started in that folder, and they remain there until they're ready to move forward to being a loan. So your lead folder ends up being like that junk drawer in the kitchen. Okay, it's going to collect a lot of loans. They're going to sit there, and eventually you're going to want to thin it out a little. I never recommend deleting records, but you can always create an archived leads folder, an archived prospect folder, and rename this one and create a new lead folder and have the loan officers move up their current leads and leaving all the rest behind. You want to hold on to those old leads, and the reason why is everyone's been familiar with our Pulse system, and within Pulse, we have tied to our Pulse marketing system, and our Pulse marketing system is going to allow you to market to those loans, and as far as I'm concerned, if you got a borrower's name and you got an email address and you happen to get a date of birth, you want to be sure to market to them. You never know someone that reached out to you 8-10 years ago that when they receive a happy birthday email from you, that it doesn't hit just at the right time that generates you a loan that you may not have gotten before. You don't want to leave any money on the table. You don't want to miss out on any opportunity. And our Pulse marketing system tied to Pulse does wonderful marketing emails in case you're interested. But that's the reason why you would never want to go in and delete a loan. Archive a loan, okay, create an archive folder that you can limit access to if you want to, or just you push it down to the bottom of your list, but never delete. And then, of course, you want a processing folder. I like a processing folder from my perspective, and the reason for that is that my loan officers have rights from my prospect folder to move their leads into the processing folder. But once the leads are moved into the processing folder, they don't have rights to move it out, and their rights are set to read only. They're only allowed to read the files when they're in the processing folder. They're not allowed to make changes to it. This works out for, I would say, 8.5 out of every 10 of my clients. The processors don't want to spend their time looking over their shoulder. So once a loan has been turned over to them, they don't want any changes made inside that loan without the changes going through them first. Now, the loan officer, even under a read-only, still has rights to make entries to the conversation log, and they still have rights to upload documents. They just don't have rights to change any of the information. If they want a different interest rate, a loan amount, they want to change up an income or something like that, they need to go through their processor to do that, so the processor is always staying up to date and current on that file and never have to look over their shoulder. And then, of course, hopefully it's going to go from processing to closed, and that's where you're going to make your money. And once a loan moves into the closed folder, as far as I'm concerned, everyone is read-only except managers. You do not want your processors or your loan officers going into your closed records and changing your historical records. You have to answer to audits. You have to answer to the state and to federal and state reporting. You want to make sure that if you pull a report against your closed folder today and then you pull that same report 4 months ago, that it's going to be the same report. And it's not going to be different. Loans aren't going to be missing. Data isn't going to be changed. So once it goes into the closed folder, you want to lock it down, okay? It doesn't mean that a loan officer can't go into a closed loan and read the information there, and it doesn't mean that they can't copy from a closed loan to start a new loan, okay? But you don't want them going in and changing that historical records and then causing you an embarrassing situation or potential for an embarrassing situation when your reports aren't matching. And then, of course, like I told you, you can take that prospect folder and you can create what I call an archive or a historical folder. And I usually use this one to put all of my older leads in. So I usually every year go into the leads folder, and I usually will leave the leads that have been added over the last 1 to 2 years, and then I'll move all of the older ones out and I'll dump them into an archive folder. And of course, everyone goes, well, how in the world do you manage to do that? Well, remember, when you go into Point and you're on your pipeline view here, you're going to have your status column. And again, this is my demo site. We've done a lot of testing lately, so there's a lot of garbage loans out there. But most of all, these loans would have a prospect status and a date. So you can simply come in and sort by the date column. You can select up to an entire page at one time. And of course, you can execute a move and move them all at one time into that archive folder. So it's a nice way to clean it up. You invest a little time, but it does keep your lead folder manageable, and it allows you to hold on to those historical records for marketing. Okay, so I have other customers that do different folders. As I tell my customers, there's no right way or wrong way. It's whatever works best for your company. Okay. I've found with my customers, creating the different folders and having the loan move through those different folders has been quite beneficial. It's very nice for a processor when they go into their processing folder to know the loans that they're looking at are the ones that are actively being processed. It's also nice for an owner of a company to go in and see the loans in the processing folder to know all those are the ones that have the potential to make the company money. And it's also nice to be able to go into the closed folder and see how many loans that you've closed. You can go in, and of course within Point you have the ability to run those wonderful reports. But as we've talked about before in the past, on our Pulse system, you also have the ability to go in and create those wonderful pipeline views where you can point them to just a single folder. And you can choose up to any of those 5,000 fields that we bring from Point over into Pulse to build those wonderful pipeline views. So we found that a lot of our customers are preferring to log into our Pulse system and create their wonderful custom pipeline views, because Point is a wonderful system, but this limits you to what you can actually see on any given screen. We allow you to design this in Pulse, and we allow you to choose from any of our 5,000 fields. So this is just a sample of a loan pipeline view, but of course you can come in and you can set it up to see any, and you can point it to different folders, you can do different filters, so you can really see all of the data. And what's nice is when you break it out into the different folders, you can point it to a folder. But of course, I do have customers that were born using the Point install for the primary data folder. Yeah, everyone, I still see it all the time. And that was the initial folder that was created by default when you installed Point locally for our Point conventional customers that have converted over. They've been used to that. They've been used to using the borrower and the prospect side of that loan folder. So sorry about that. I clicked on the wrong icon. They've been used to using the two sides, from the prospect to the borrower side of that folder. That's always worked out best for them, which is perfectly fine. If that's what you wish to do, that works out great. The problem is when you go to assign security inside PointCentral, the security is assigned at the data folder level. So if you have just one folder, you can't set your processing folder up as read-only. If you have everything in one folder, you can't go in and block everyone out from the closed folder so that they can't change anything. So another benefit about having it broken out into the different data folders, it gives you the ability to set those different security levels. So with all that said, let's go talk about those wonderful security levels. So I'm going to edit one of these data folders. And you're going to notice when you come in to edit it, this is the prospect folder. This is another benefit of using a prospect folder, is basically, again, we've been doing some testing because we have customers that still use both sides of it. But what's nice is when I have a prospect folder, my prospect folder would be my only folder that I've set up auto file naming. You wouldn't want, and what we're finding with a lot of our customers and a lot of the support calls that we get, everyone, is that they will call in and say that their loans are disappearing, and they don't know why. Well, we will go into their PointCentral admin page and we will take a look at the way that they have their folders set up. And what we've discovered is when we look at their folders is they have auto file naming turned on their prospect folder, on their processing folder, on their closed folder, on their archive folder. So that means that you can go in and you can create a new lead inside any of these folders. So by doing that, if you were to create a lead today in the prospect folder and you have the same format set up for the processing folder and someone created a lead in the processing folder, then when you go to move your lead from your prospect folder to the processing folder, you're going to override their lead. Okay? And people will get that prompt, you want to override, and they're going to go, oh, shoot, maybe I copied it over and moved it, or maybe I did something wrong, and they tend to want to say yes, and when they do, they wipe out that other record. That's where you have to be really, really careful. You want those individual folders, and you want to make sure that auto file naming is simply turned on the borrower side, and that it's the only folder they're allowed to create leads in for auto file naming would be the prospect folder. It really helps you keep control of your file naming, and it guarantees and lessens those number of calls to us to do a restore because files get overridden. In the security screen, you have the ability to set up group access rights, and you have the ability to set up user access rights. As I said earlier, I much prefer group access rights because once I assign it to a folder and I assign new users to these groups, my job's done. I don't have to go to each data folder. I don't have to make changes. I create the user, assign them to the group, and I'm done, and I can go on doing my job. Because most of the time, the PointCentral administrators are doing this on top of their normal day-to-day work. So we want to make it as easy, or you want to make it as easy as possible for yourself. So when you go in to set these up, if we go over here and we click on Edit, you're going to see a very basic screen here. This screen is the same whether I edit the manager group, whether I edit the assigned loans group, or whether I go down here and I add individual user access. It's all the same screen. Same fields, same screen. No difference, okay? The difference is where you're applying that, whether you're setting the screen up under each one of these or whether you're setting the screen up down here. Can you have groups assigned and can you have individual user access assigned? Yes, you can. And I'll explain that exception to you in just a couple minutes. But let's walk through one of those security screens. So we're going to go to the managers. And of course, like I said earlier, usually this is the manager group, and managers have rights to see all. This is usually the easiest screen to set up, you would think, because they have full rights to everything, but it's the one that I dislike the most because I have to go check every single box. Calyx doesn't give you a select all button. Would be nice if they did, but they don't. So basically, you go in and you check every single box because you never want that manager to come back and get a little pop-up screen saying they're not allowed. Okay? Let's go back and let's do a walkthrough of each section, but let's do it from a loan officer perspective. And then I'll tell you the difference of usually what I recommend between a loan officer and a processor. Now, this particular screen, we're going to make some changes to it as we go along because people have been coming in and doing things with it during testing. But usually, I'm talking about assigned loans only. So basically here under loan view, I wouldn't have the radio button all loans. I'd have this originator, processors, and or other users' loans. So basically right here, what I'm doing is I'm telling this group that they own, who's ever assigned to this group only has rights to see their own loans. We're not going to get into other users' loans, okay? This field, this particular drop-down is beneficial, and I'll explain why, but you're going to do that at an individual user level, okay? Because the screen is identical no matter what section I'm in. So there's some features you want to use in one that you don't necessarily, or I found not to be beneficial to use in another. So I'm not going to get into the other user loans. I'm simply going to set it, this originator or processor's loans only. Now, when you set it to something like this, this is where you have to be very, very careful, everyone. Inside Point, okay, when you add a new loan to the system, okay, and you assign the loan officer or you assign the processor, and that loan officer or processor is in this group here where they can only see their own loans, the way the security works is it's going to take their user account that you set up and how you put their name in, and it's going to take that name and it's going to compare that name to the way their name appears in Point. So if users are allowed to click on New and OK, and they're allowed to come down here and type their name in the originator box, you're going to get a lot of support calls because they're going to say, I just created a new lead and I can't find it. It didn't save or something went terribly wrong. Well, it didn't. They actually came here and they typed their name into the originator box when in reality you want them to choose from a drop-down list. You want them to choose from the drop-down list because you built that list to match letter for letter, space for space, dot for dot to the way that you set up their name inside PointCentral, okay? And to set up these drop-down lists are really very easy. You access them up here under Utilities. You go to Company Default, and you simply come, drop-down list, and you come over here and you have all the different drop-down lists. If I go to Originators, this will bring up and allow me to add my originator, their NMLS number, their email address. I can even restrict what states that they have rights to do loans in. So it's really very simple, and I want to make sure that their names, the way they're entered here and they're selected here, is going to match the way that I created their names under their user account. So that way when I select this option, it's going to give them rights to see that loan. It's really that simple. Under loan access, they're either going to have edit or read only. For the prospect folder, which is the one that I'm in right now, I would give them edit because I want them to create leads, okay? But if I was setting up this same screen for my processing folder, I would say read only. I do not want them to be able to come in and make changes to the loan once it's turned over to the processor, okay? The conversation log, I always give them add and edit, no matter what. No matter what folder it's in, I want them to be able to add to the conversation log. I give them edit. That's going to be up to you. Edit means that they can go in and they can make changes to the entry. Some people don't want edit because they don't want them to be able to go back in and change it. Some people do because they also know that conversation log is visible to outside, can be visible to outside auditors and things like that. And if someone was really upset and wrote something they shouldn't, they want to give them the option to go back and remove it. But I never give them the right to delete. I don't give them a right to be able to go in and delete a bunch of entries from a conversation log to hide something. I don't allow delete for anyone in the company that's not a manager. But of course, that's up to you. Of course, under document storage, I give them the rights to add, edit, email, print, and save as. Again, I don't give them the rights to delete. I don't want them to upload a pay stub and then have the rights to delete that pay stub, upload a new one for the same pay period with different information on it. Keep honest people honest. It's as simple as that. Down here under loan management, of course, they have access rights to copy and move. They have access rights to copy and move, to save as a 1003, to export and to import, and to email if you allow them to email back and forth. But if everyone's running on PointCentral and you have no one running on conventional Point, there's no need to be emailing loans back and forth. Okay, and there's no need to give them save as. They can save it as a 1003 and have that 1003 information, but that's not even used anytime anymore. Basically, if they're interfacing with the third-party application, that's going to be done in the form of an export to Fannie Mae 3.2. And then you did, and we can talk about that in some future training calls in Point later on, and we did briefly talk about this in our one last month, I believe, where you can actually import Fannie Mae 3.2s. So you would want to give them access to do that if you saw fit to do so. Allow offline file creation has to do with the auto file naming. I'll be real honest, you're going to need to ask Calix about that. I never successfully, back when I was doing it, had much luck with this, and I really didn't want my loan officers creating loans somewhere where they didn't have internet access. So if they did, it didn't involve auto file naming. Once they uploaded it to the server, we auto file named it at the time. Down here under company defaults, this is a loan officer, okay, or a potential contract processor. Someone I only want rights to see their own loans. I don't want them to have access to the company defaults or the drop-down list or the audit trail. Now, the company defaults and the drop-down list, that means that I don't want them to have access to go in and make changes. It doesn't mean that they're not going to, the company defaults aren't going to auto-populate into their loans, and it doesn't mean that they can't select from a drop-down list. And then, of course, I don't want to give them access to the audit trail. Usually the audit trail, everyone, was always my ace in the hole, okay? I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to do something really quick here. I'm going to open up another copy of the screen. Because basically here under configuration and parameters, all the way at the bottom, you have an option to enable tracking of field changes and document actions, okay, within the Point system. For anyone who doesn't know much about the audit trail, basically the audit trail records the date, the time, the user who opened the file. It records the field ID number, the field name, what was in the field when the file was opened, and what was in the field when the file was closed and saved. So you could go into a file, go to the audit trail, okay, and it won't do it in a loan that hasn't been saved. Let's see if I can find one. You can open a file, go to utilities and go to the audit trail. And basically, it's going to open up a read-only screen. And in that screen, it's going to show you all of the information that's been entered on that loan. It's going to show you who the user was, the field name that was changed, the field ID number, what was in the field prior to the change, what was in it after the Save button was selected, and of course, the date and time it was done. The audit trail is a great way to go back to see exactly who did what and when. I know that you've experienced in your past, or at least I have, where loan officers say, no, I didn't. The processor says, yes, you did. And the loan, no, I didn't. Well, the audit trail always allowed me to go back to see exactly who did what and when. So I really like having this enabled, and it's really a nice feature, but I usually keep it just for the managers. Under the tracking system, I usually give them, give the loan officers edit to the registration and lock screen. For me and mine, we never did much with the trust screen and the loan profit and loss screen. That would be up to you and your company. They don't need access to the underwriter, closing, shipping, secondary, feeds. I usually would give them read-only to the condition screen, and usually the other screens they were blocked out of. If anyone's going to have rights to those, it's going to be the processor. So that's the reason why I liked having a group that I could just specifically say, this is my loan officers, and this is what I need them to have access to. And these settings usually worked quite well. Now, if I was setting this up not for a loan officer, but for a processor, then it's a little different. The processors, I give edit to all of the screens so they can pick and choose which ones they're going to use. And then depending on whether you do the trust account or the loan profit and loss, you can give them rights to that too. A lot of the processors for the companies do help the owners of the companies, who are usually the managers, make changes and stuff in the company defaults and drop downs, and you can go in and you can give them access to that. But it's as simple as that. You go in, you set up the screen, you update the access rights, and then you simply go down and you do it for each one. Now, once you have these set up in one data folder, you don't have to go repeat this through each one of the data folders. Okay, you don't have to repeat it for processing, closed, and archived. I'm way too lazy, to be honest, everyone. Once I have security set up in one folder, I can actually go to my next folder, and we'll pretend that this isn't set up. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to delete this. And we're going to pretend that this is my new folder, or this folder, they're not set up, so there's no security on this folder. Also, being a new folder, okay, and being new to the system, I do not want to have to go in, and I do not want to have to go through all 4 of my data folders and set up my company defaults and set up my drop-down list and all of that. I want to do all of my setup in my first folder. Once I have it all set up in my first folder, then I have the ability to come down and I have access to these 2 wonderful boxes at the bottom. I can copy my folder settings, so I can come down and I can say, okay, I want you to copy everything from my Atlanta prospect folder when it comes to my company defaults and drop-downs, and I want you to copy my security from the prospect folder. Now, I know you're thinking, why do I want to do that? I just said security is different. Well, again, I love shortcuts, don't you? So I'm going to select those and I'm going to copy them. And once I do, I'm going to reload my screen. It makes you go back out. It will not let you do it. I was hoping they changed that. Well, let me do a reload. I have to go out and come back in. So now these security groups have been copied from my prospect folder to my processing folder. So now my manager's security stays the same. I don't need to change that. My processor security stays the same. I don't need to change that. But this was where I take the opportunity to go in to the loan officer, who would have been edit on the prospect folder, and I would have come over here and switched it to read only. And then I would have come down here and taken away the rights to move. So that makes it really nice to where I simply can copy from one data folder to the other, the company setups as well as the security, and I don't have to go back in and redo them each time. The last thing I wanted to show you on the security was I told you have the ability to set up user access rights individually. Let's say that you have a loan officer that has 2 junior loan officers working with them. They're mentoring them. It still happens. I hear it all the time. So instead of assigning those loan officers to the groups where they're assigned to their loans only, because I have 1 individual out of my 8 loan officers mentoring 2 juniors, not all of them. So I want this group, and I'm going to assign everyone else to this group, but that loan officer and the 2 juniors, I'm going to assign their security individually down here. And I'm sorry, I'm going to assign the loan officer that's mentoring them, I'm going to assign their security down here, giving them a little bit of different rights. The 2 juniors I would assign to this group because, again, the juniors, when they log in, I want them to only see their own loans, so this security level applies. The only difference is the one mentoring them needs to see more than just their own loans. So I wouldn't add them to this group. What I would do is I'd come down and I would add them here. You can click on Add User Group Access Rights. You can come in here and you can select them. So we'll pretend it's Ken Davis. So Ken Davis, I would come down and I would set up Ken Davis's screen for all the security boxes and everything. Is going to be set up identical for what I did for the other loan officers. He's not going to be given more rights than the other loan officers are. He's still restricted to what I want him to see and not see. The only difference is that I'm also going to give Ken rights to see Brandon's loans, and I'm going to give Ken rights to see George King's loans. So basically what I did is I'm taking this whole security screen and I'm saying that he has, which I've chosen, Ken Davis, is where this originator or processor and or other user loans, he only has rights to see his loans, or I've given him rights to also see Brandon's and George King's. It's the same rights no matter what files he opens. All of this stays the same, and I would match that to the other loan officers. He's not going to be special to the point where he can open a screen that they can, or he can edit a field that they can't. The only difference is by adding him here, he now has the ability to actually see Brandon and George's loans besides his own. So it really does give you that extra little caveat to be able to accommodate those exceptions. You do want to be careful when you do them. You want to think them through. And if you have difficulty setting them up and you know you have a need to, reach out to Calyx, and I'm sure they'll be more than happy to walk you through it. But don't forget about these wonderful 2 little boxes down here that really do a great job allowing you to copy those folder settings as well as to copy those access rights. So I've done a lot of talking in a short period of time. Let's go see if we have any questions. Is there a maximum number of data folders you can have in PointCentral? No, there's not. You can have as many as you want. The most that I've had, I think, is I had a company that had almost 300 data folders. They had 4 or 5 data folders for each one of their 60 branches. So, you know, and then of course, what's nice about that is they went in and within that data folder, when they created their groups here for companies that have different multiple branches, what they did is each one of the branches, there would be Atlanta managers. They would be Atlanta processors. They would be Atlanta assigned loans only. They would be California. There would be whatever it was. So they would have a grouping of each one of their security groups set up for each one of the branches. And then those users would be assigned to their grouping for their branch. And then that branch's group would be the one that they would use to assign access to the data folder. So they would assign the main manager group because the main managers are the owners and the hierarchies within the company, and they get to see everything. But then instead of doing the generic users and processors, they would assign the assigned managers for that branch, as well as that branch's assigned loan officers, as well as their processors. So there is a way to control all that security to protect your data so that you're not always looking over your shoulder. And there's a lot of creative ways that you can do that. But if you thought that, you know, if you need help, don't ever hesitate to take a few moments and reach out to Calyx, or you can even call our support line. Our 2 level 2 techs, Brandon and Tyler, are very familiar with this. And if not, they can always reach out to me. The customer that asked if there was a limit on data folders said, yeeks, I thought we had a lot at 139. You really don't. I had one company, they're no longer in business. The owner of this particular company decided one day to give everyone 30 days notice and shut it down. Don't ask me why. People do the unusual things. But they're no longer in business, but they were one that I knew did quite a few of the different data folders for each branches. So does anyone else have any other questions? I know I covered a lot in a short period of time. Of course, I'm recording this just like I have in the past. I will convert the recording, and everyone who registered for the call, I will send you the link so that you can access the recordings on our YouTube site. Okay, everyone? Does anyone else have any questions? Feel free to post them to the question queue in your GoToMeeting that I can answer before we end today's call. I know we're at the end of the hour. Well, everyone, thank you so much for taking time out of your day and joining my call. I'm really enjoying these, and I'm so appreciative that you are too by joining the calls. And I look forward to sharing with you next in 2 weeks on our call for February 20th, where we'll talk about templates, Cardex, reservations, and statuses, and we'll go over those reports because there's a few other really cool things that I want to show you about on the report screen. Thank you, everyone, and have a wonderful day. I look forward to having you join me on February 20th. Bye-bye, everyone.